Hi everyone, how are you guys? You guys are back here for another week of the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. And this week we're working on this piece actually behind me. And this is actually going to be a bathroom vanity in my customer's home. So I keep a stockpile of inventory pieces people can choose from with dimensions, and they can look and see what might fit for their space. And then we work on finishes together. So she's actually chosen a finish that looks like a weathered wood finish when it's done. So I'm clearly not done with this piece yet, but we're gonna layer some colors together, alternating with some browns and grays, working in the neutral family. So it looks like a genuine weathered wood. And by the time we layer all those colors together, they each peek through and add a little bit to this finish. We're going to use dry brushing and color wash techniques to get this finish. And then we're also going to pour some resin on this top. It's going to be beautiful. So I hope you guys stick around. Let's go ahead and get started on this piece. Here's where I started on this piece. I picked it up off my local Facebook marketplace. It's made by Bernhardt, so it's a really nicely made piece of furniture. The marble top did have a small crack in the front, but it didn't go all the way through, so I'm going to pour resin over the top to save that. I started off by taking all my hardware off with a screwdriver. Those went into a dish to make sure they're in safekeeping until I'm done. Now I'm going to clean my piece really well using Dixie Belle White Lightning. I make sure to rinse it using water afterwards to remove any cleaning residue. I do plan on pouring resin over the marble top on this piece, so I'm going to give it a scuff sanding using my Surf Prep sander. The scuff sanding is just going to take down the sheen on the marble and help my resin adhere better. Before pouring the resin over the top of this marble, I went ahead and gave it a coat of Dixie Belle Slick Stick. This is going to take it to a white, which is closer to the color of resin that I'm going to be using. All right, I'm also going to apply Slick Stick to the body of my piece, only this piece is going to be done in grays and neutrals. So I'm going to take my Slick Stick, I'm going to go ahead and pour some into this dish here. And then I'm going to go ahead and tint it. And when I tint my Slick Stick, I use very little paint, just enough to get it to slightly closer to the color that I want. So I'm just going to take a spoonful of, this is Dixie Belle Caviar, and I'm going to turn this into a gray. It's going to be a very light gray, but it's closer to the colors that I'm going to be using than the stark white. It will be easier for me to cover the gray version of the Slick Stick versus a stark white. And it's so little paint that I'm not altering the formula. I make sure to always keep it under 10% at least, if not far less than that, probably under 5% there. Just mix in that spoonful, and instead of a stark white, I've got a nice medium gray there. Slick Stick goes on just like a paint. I'm using my Dixie Belle Mini to get the smoothest finish possible, and I'm going to brush it on in long, even brush strokes, going from top to bottom, just working in small sections of my piece until I get all the way across the side. This is going to be the base that my paint lays on top of, so keeping this as smooth as possible is a priority. This piece is solid wood, so Slick Stick is probably overkill because I did scuff sand as well, but I'd rather do too much than not enough. Here's where my piece is at after a coat of Slick Stick over the entire body and on the top as well. This marble is actually loose, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the top and pour the resin on that with it detached from the body of the piece. All right, so I've got my Dixie Belle Slick Stick that I tinted to this light soft gray, and my next coat on this piece is actually going to be a coat of Dixie Belle French Linen, which is this warm neutral. And I'm using my Dixie Belle Mini to apply it. I'm going to use a lot of water to get a nice smooth base coat on my piece. What my plan is here is I'm going to layer neutrals. So I'm starting with kind of a medium neutral, and my next coat is going to go to a brown, and then I'm going to alternate browns and grays from there. It's going to be a really layered look. But this is going to give me the perfect base to start laying my colors on. I'm going to go ahead and apply some water to my surface just so my brush glides really nice and smooth. This is going to help me get a nice even coat. Make sure and cut in all my corners, and then I can just come and fill in this open space, a little bit of water just to help my brush glide. That's how I get the smoothest finish possible. It ends up looking like a sprayed finish once the paint levels itself and dries. And then that light sanding in between each coat just helps perfect it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up here and get this coat of French linen around my entire body, and that will be the base. We'll go on to our next step. Here's the body all coated in French linen. It is ready to lay my paint technique on top of, but I'm going to go ahead and pull my hardware out. I don't like to save that to the end because I want to make sure that it's ready to put on when I'm done with my paint finish. So I just went ahead and cleaned this in a 50-50 mixture of white vinegar and water, and I want this hardware to turn to a bronze color. It's naturally gold. I want it to be bronze. So I sprayed it in a flat black and then a light mist of bronze over the top, and then I gave it a clear coat in clear lacquer, and these are going to wear really well. I always make sure I choose spray paints that have a built-in primer. Skip the cheap ones, they're not worth it. The finish on this is going to end up looking like a kind of weathered wood finish. So I've got my base layer of French linen. I'm going to use my Dixie Belle Mini, and I'm going to spray my surface with some water. I want a nice wet surface, and I'm basically going to do a color wash. So I'm going to go ahead and brush on Dixie Belle Coffee Bean, just a light layer, a thin layer over the entire side of this piece. My plan is I'm going to come back and wipe this back. So I want to keep my paint nice and wet and moving. I don't want to let it dry while it's over here. I'm going to keep my white marks going in a horizontal motion. So I did use vertical brush strokes just to get coverage, but I'm going to come back and correct those to horizontal because that's the way that I intend to wipe it off. Once I've got an even coat, I'm going to ball up my rag, and I'm going to come back and I wipe in a horizontal motion by planting my rag and then pulling it to the side. And that leaves this strié effect, which are these nice stripy marks in my paint. While I let the paint on the side dry, I'm going to come over and do this column on the front. I'm going to do the same effect by brushing on my coffee bean, and then I'm going to come back with my rag and wipe it away. And that's going to leave coffee bean just filling the crevices of this column. These are extremely thin layers of paint, so they do dry pretty quickly. And now that my side has had a little bit of chance to set up, I'm going to come back with some Dixie Belle Manatee Gray and my premium chip brush. And I'm going to brush on a thin streaky layer of the Manatee Gray. My intent here is to wipe it back the same way that I did the coffee bean. My last layer of paint in this finish is going to be Dixie Belle drop cloth. So I'm going to come back using another premium chip brush, and I'm going to brush on some streaky layers of my Dixie Belle drop cloth. I'm going to use a little bit of water. It's almost a dry brushing effect, but the little bit of water softens those brush strokes so it's not a full dry brush. Anywhere I feel like I've gotten too much, I can just come back and correct that with my rag. But I try to keep this kind of uneven. I want a little bit of inconsistency. The randomness is what makes this paint finish look beautiful. I'm going to continue brushing my drop cloth up the side of my piece until I feel like my finish is consistent enough. I can see spots where my French linen base is peeking through from underneath. There's darker streaks where I've got the coffee bean, and then I've got the Manatee Gray and the drop cloth. This side has great contrast, a little bit of streakiness. I'm going to play this up with some waxes later, but let's turn this piece and go ahead and get some drop cloth on one of the columns. These columns have great detail, and so hitting them with a dry brush or the drop cloth is really going to bring some of that out. So dry brushing is a technique where you use almost no paint on your brush, and just the dry textured bristles of the natural bristle brush is going to hit the high points of this molding, and it's going to really bring out the details. I'm not sure how, but it looks like I missed recording the wax portion of this piece on video, so I'm going to use its sister piece as an example. So the next step in this is I'm going to use some Dixie Belle Best Dang wax in brown, and I'm going to brush it on in a streaky pattern. This is going to emphasize some of the darker areas in my paint finish. I really want to kind of exaggerate the streakiness. I'm just using a small natural bristle brush, and I'm brushing my brown wax onto areas that are naturally darker in the paint finish. This is going to darken them even more. Wax will absorb into the raw paint, and it's going to change the color and deepen those colors a little bit in the areas that I apply it to. Wax is great because you can change your paint colors with it, deepen those colors even more by just applying some dark wax to it. I used a little bit of Dixie Belle Bronze Gilding Wax just on some of the moldings on this piece. You'll notice I have the top reapplied and it's all poured in resin. If you want to catch that video, you can search resin up on my YouTube channel and you'll find that in a separate video. My bronze painted hardware is back on, and I've staged this with a really spa-like feel. It is going to be a bathroom vanity. I did spray this piece with 2 coats of Dixie Belle Gator Hide. Gator Hide is the most protective top coat in the Dixie Belle line, so that's going to make this extra water resistant for a bathroom setting. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can find links for everything I used on this project in the description of this post. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com.